What's up everyone, my name is Dave, and today I'll be upgrading my miter saw station. I've had this old Hitachi for about 18 years and it's been a great saw, but I recently came across a really good deal on the Bosch Glide. And since this new tool takes up such a smaller footprint than my old saw, I thought now would be a great time to make a dedicated workstation for it. The base of the station is going to be made up of 4 modular cabinets that I can move around into any configuration. I'll start by cutting all the sheet goods down to size with my circular saw. Next I'll start working on the case of the cabinets, getting all the sides, top and bottom, cut down to their final size at the table saw. Here I'm laying out the bottom shelf and back support for the left and right sides of one of the cabinets. I set the saw up to make a 1/4 inch groove in the cabinet sides that will accept the back panel. I'll change over to a 3/4 inch dado stack so that I can cut the slots that'll accept the bottoms and the shelves. Now I can head over to the bandsaw and cut out 3.5 inch squares for the toe kicks on the cabinet sides. Here I'm cutting out braces for all 4 cabinets. These are 3 inches wide and they're going to be used at the top of the cabinets, in the back, and also down at the bottom near the toe kick. The last parts I need to cut out to build up the case of the cabinets is the back panels. The braces I cut out earlier are going to be attached to the cabinet cases using pocket holes. I'll get them cut for all 4 cabinets here. I'm finally ready to do some assembly. I'm using Titebond number 3 here, mostly because that's what I had on hand. I'll get the sides put together, the back panel in, and then I can apply some clamps, and then go ahead and screw in all the braces for the top, side, back, and bottom. Before the glue dries, I'll check the cases to make sure that they're square. With the cases assembled, I can take measurements of the opening to determine how wide and long the doors need to be for each case. 2 of the cabinets are going to have doors and the other one are going to have drawer sets. So I'll cut the doors out to size at the table saw. I'll line up the door to the case and mark out where I want the hinges to go on both sides. To drill out the hinge locations, I'll use this Craig concealed hinge jig. This jig makes it really easy to not only drill out the cavities for where the hinges sit, but also the pilot holes for the screws that hold the hinges in place. This tool's turned out to be really useful and it's actually inexpensive. If you're interested in getting one for yourself, I'll leave a link to where you can get it in the description. Once all the holes are drilled, I'll start by installing the hinges to the doors, and then I'll line up the doors to the cases themselves. I'll put a spacer between the case and the door, and then I can line up the screws to the case, get them installed, and usually the door shuts pretty well. Now that the 2 easy cabinets are done, I can turn my attention to the cabinets with the drawers and start the very tedious task of cutting out all the drawer fronts, bottoms, sides, and backs. The drawers are going to be held together using what's called the quarter method. This is 1/2 inch plywood, so I'll set up the dado stack and I'll make a 1/4 inch wide dado, and I'll set the dado a 1/4 inch away from the fence and a 1/4 inch high, and then I'll cut grooves in the fronts, backs, and sides of the drawers. The grooves on the fronts and the back should interlock with the ones on the sides and create a pretty solid joint. I'll also use this same setup to cut grooves into the drawer sides and front and backs that will accept the bottom panel. Next I'll cut the 1/4 inch birch plywood that I'm going to use for the bottom panels to their final sizes. Now it's time to assemble the drawers. I'll use glue in all the interlocking joints, leave the bottom shelf to float, and I'll use pin nails to hold everything in place until the glue dries. The last step is to make sure that everything is square, and then I can repeat the process on all the remaining drawers. To install the drawers to the case, I need to align these drawer slides. Here I'm using 1/2 inch scrap plywood to space the drawer slides off the bottom. Now I'll use some 1/2 inch screws to screw in the slides from the side. Then I can install the drawer to the case, use the 1/2 inch shims to get everything lined up, and put some screws into the side of the drawer. The remaining drawers need to be about 1.5 inches apart. So I'll use 3 pieces of the scrap 1/2 inch plywood and repeat the same process I did for the bottom drawer all the way to the top drawer. I'll do a quick check to make sure that the drawers aren't sticking out past the cabinet, and then I can move on to the drawer faces. The fronts of the drawers are going to sit flush with the cabinet case, so I'll start by applying some double-sided tape to a scrap piece of 1/2 inch plywood again, and I'll stick that on the bottom of the cabinet case. After measuring out the drawer faces and cutting them to size with the table saw, I'll apply some double-sided tape to the back of the drawer face. Next, I'll rest the drawer face on the shim that I put on the case earlier. Squeeze the front of the drawer to the face, and that should give me enough sticking power to where I can open the drawer and then get a couple of screws in the back. For the rest of the drawer faces, I created a shim that's just about 1/8 inch thick, repeated the double-sided tape method, and worked my way up all the rest of the drawers. Here I'm applying a finish to all the cabinets. I'm using just whatever I had on hand, in this case with some polyurethane. These are shop cabinets, and the drawer faces and colors and stuff aren't going to really match because the plywood's really cheap and I had to just find the least amount of blemishes for each face. But in the end, I think it looks pretty good. To finish out the cabinets, I'll just install these drawer pulls that hang over top of the face of the drawers and the doors. The countertop portion of the miter saw station is going to be made up of 2 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood laminated together. I'll start at the top by cutting all the pieces to size of the table saw. Then I can apply some glue, roll it all out, put the 2 halves together, and then apply some screws to keep everything held together until the glue dries. The top's going to have a T-track routed into it so that I can add stop blocks to make repeatable cuts at the miter saw station. So I'll make sure to install the screws in a spot where I won't hit it with the router later. Here I'm just repeating the process for the second section of the countertop. Now that the bases and the countertops are done, I can put everything into place. Here I'm lining up all the cabinets up against the wall. I'm pretty lucky to have a pretty flat concrete surface. If it was really uneven, I would have had to put some shims in underneath or get some type of adjustable levelers. Once I have all the cabinets in place, I'm able to start laying out where the miter saw itself is going to sit. The miter saw is going to sit on an 1.5 inch piece of laminated plywood. So after measuring out the table of the miter saw and adding 1.5 inches for the plywood, I'll go ahead and mark it out on the side of the cabinets. Next, I'll create a shelf that'll mount to the sides of the cabinet that the miter saw can sit on. I'll bring the saw over to the station and give it a test fit, making sure that it sits flush, not too low or not too high over the countertop. If it doesn't sit flush to the countertop or level, I'm able to put shims underneath the saw itself or the shelf. After getting everything in place and giving it some thought, I realized some of the things I'll be putting in one of the door base cabinets aren't very tall. I'd like to maximize the space, and I have one extra set of drawer glides left and some scrap plywood. So I'm creating here a shelf that'll sit in one of the door cabinets, and I'm just cutting everything to size. I'll assemble the whole thing with pocket screws, and then I'll get the drawer glides installed into the cabinet case, put the shelf in it itself, and I'll have an extra bit of space in that tall cabinet. To hide some of the plywood edges on the cabinets and on the countertops, I'm going to trim everything out with some oak strips. I have some rough cut oak here, so I'll start by flattening everything on the joiner, setting it through the planer, and then cutting everything to size at the table saw. I'll get everything cut to the proper length, then I'll apply some glue to all the strips and then wrap them around all the countertops. I'll use brad nails to kind of hold everything in place, and then I'll level all the strips out using a small block plane. Next, I'll get everything sanded down smooth. I got to use a lot of caution here to not blow through the less than paper thin veneers on the plywood. But once that's all done, I can get the countertops mounted to the base. I did have to use some shims here between the countertop itself and the base cabinets. So I'll get those all in place, everything leveled out, and then I can install some screws from the base up into the top, and then everything should be sitting pretty level. To make room for dust collection hose, I'm cutting a notch in the back of the shelf that the saw is going to sit on. Once that's done, I'll put everything back in place, get the dust collection hose up through the bottom, and then put the miter saw back in its position. One thing I forgot to include in the video earlier is that I did upgrade the factory dust collection that came on the Bosch with this Shop Nation aftermarket dust collection. The factory setup is really poor, and this new dust collection is supposed to be much improved over that. So I'm excited to try it out, and hopefully it works out well. To make repeatable cuts at the miter saw station, I'm installing a T-track and the stop block setup. I'll use this long board registered off of the miter saw fence itself to clamp into place and then route out the spot for the T-track to sit in. Before I install any of the T-track, I'm going to go over all the surfaces and apply a good coat of polyurethane. Now I'm ready to screw the track down, reinstall the miter saw for like the third time now, and then kind of make sure everything's flushed up and true. I installed a few screws to keep the saw in place, but I had to loosen them up a little bit because the saw has rubber feet on it, and if you tighten them down too much it would pull everything out of level. Off camera I made a couple of simple stop blocks for the T-track, but other than that this project's all finished up. I think everything came out pretty good. I'm really happy with the results, and it's nice and square and level, and I think this will be a good solution to get some better storage and a lot more repeatable cuts in my miter saw station. You can see here where I can use the shelves to store a lot of my stuff, some of my saws and different things underneath. The drawers hold my sandpaper and just a whole bunch of different things to get them off the shop floor. And if you made it this far into the video and you watched this last clip, you'll notice that Bosch Glide is not the saw that I have in here anymore. After about a month or so of using Bosch, I just couldn't get used to it. I didn't like the dust collection. The Shop Nation dust collection made it a little better, but not what I was hoping for, so I ended up going with the Festool. Plan on making a video soon to show the comparisons between my old Hitachi, the Bosch, and the Festool. So stay tuned for that. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.